Hello, BC Calculus students. This is Mr. Johnson, and I hope you're doing well today. We're going to cover section 1.3 today, which is on mathematical models. And we're going to start with a class opener and just review a couple of things we talked about in sections 1.1 and then a little bit in 1.2. The piecewise definition for the absolute value function, which will come up off and on, or something similar to it will come up off and on, is going to be x if x is greater than or equal to 0, and negative x if x is less than 0. And then again, that can be applied to other items as well. One side note, when we start to get into chapter 2 and we're going to look at limits, if you have a limit that causes you to have some sort of absolute value like behavior, where maybe, I don't know, it could be something along the lines of like the absolute value of x plus 1 divided by x plus 1, something like that. Think of it as creating a piecewise function, because it's really important that whenever we have a function that maybe has some sort of sharp corner, we want to try to write it in two different parts. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I keep on reminding you about the absolute value function and functions like that. Okay, then we also have just a quick review of even versus odd. So for an even function, the definition is f of negative x equal to f of x. In section 1.1, I showed you an example of this, so make sure that you show even versus odd exactly how I show you. Don't try to create your own way, just show it how I demonstrated it in that section 1.1 lesson. If you have questions about that, obviously let me know. But it's really important that you kind of don't go off script there. And then for odd, we have f of negative x equal to negative f of x. And keep in mind that even odd is not a super common thing on the AP exam, but we have seen it show up before. It's just not super common. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some trigonometry graphing. So let's look at sine of 2x first. Now, in pre-calculus, you end up doing a whole lot of graphing where you have multiple transformations. That is just not common in calculus. In calculus, we might have one or two transformations. The big key to this is that in FRQ, you might be asked something like, when is this particular equation, maybe this is velocity, and you're trying to figure out when is the velocity equal to 0. Well, I think one of the easier ways to do this is to be able to graph it. So that's one of the reasons why I want you to be able to graph trig functions really quickly. And I do not need you to do 6 transformations. I need you to do 1 or maybe 2, and that's it. Okay, so here's how I think of this. We start off with sine of x. So sine of x is one that you absolutely need to memorize in terms of the way it looks. So sine of x does this where we have 0 and pi and then 2 pi. Okay, and those are going to be our x-intercepts. We also should know, how high it goes on the y-axis, how low it goes on the y-axis, and the maxes and mins and all that good stuff. Okay, so when we look at this particular function, sine of the quantity 2x, that means that horizontally we've shrunk this function down by a factor of 1/2. So we are essentially taking this and sort of squeezing it horizontally, which means that each of our x-intercepts would be divided by 2. And so what we have, I'm just going to erase these first ones that I have, or I'm going to try to. Here we go. What we have then are x-intercepts of 0, pi over 2, and pi. And it's just a quick way to reference, because like I said, if this was the velocity of some particle, and we wanted to know when is the velocity 0, well, now we have our answer on at least this particular interval. And if we needed to extend the interval, we certainly could. It would be pretty easy at this point. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. So the number 2, we do have 2 transformations here. I'm going to just sort of sketch these out. It's not too difficult with multiple colors. So here is the normal sine of x graph. Okay, so it looks something like this. I'm sorry, I'm not the best artist on the iPad. Okay, and then the 1 is going to be a shift up or translation up 1 unit, and the negative is going to be a vertical reflection over the x-axis. So we could do this kind of in any order we want. Let's do the vertical, let me rephrase that. So as long as we keep in mind what's happening in terms of our reflection, we could sort of do this in any order we want. We want to keep in mind that that reflection is going to sort of happen first due to multiplication. But if we were to reposition our axes, and we know it's going to go up 1 unit, we could sort of picture what's happening from there. But I think the easiest way to do this is to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and reflect this over the x-axis. Okay, that's sort of the first algebraic thing that will happen. And then we're going to take that and then just shift that up 1 unit. Now, what I was referencing there just a second ago is that, you know, we sort of have this new axis that we're referencing in terms of where the sine graph is going back and forth. So this is going to be our final graph for this particular equation. And it looks something like that. So I'm just taking that blue sketch and just shifting it up 1 unit to finalize things. So, you know, if for instance we were being asked, is this function, or when is this function negative? Well, based on our graph, it's never negative. The lowest value on the y-axis will be 0. So you could ask all sorts of things there, but again, getting a visual is helpful and important. Okay, let's move on. So we have a little bit of composition of function review. This notation that you see right here is not super common anymore. We see it in our textbook once in a while. Certainly you will see it at different colleges and universities. On the AP exam, I haven't seen it too often. Typically what we've seen instead is going to be this notation. Keep in mind though that it's important to know different types of notation and what they mean and how they relate. So in this case, these two types of notation are going to be equivalent. So what we're going to do is we're going to take g of x and substitute that in for the input in f of x. So we're going to take g of x, which is x squared, input it into f of x. We get the square root of x squared. And some of you are thinking, well, that's just x, and that is wrong. It's the absolute value of x. This is something that should have come up in higher algebra. And maybe even algebra for you, but again, that could have been a while ago. It should have also probably come up in pre-calculus. If you don't believe me, then go to your calculator. I would show you, but I can't pull it up on this screen at the same time. Graph this in, let's say, y1, and graph this in y2, and then graph this in y3, for instance. And what you will see is that those two are absolutely identical. Okay, so then you'll hopefully believe me. All right, let's move on and talk about the opposite. So we have g of f of x. So we'll take f of x, which is the square root of x, and substitute that in for the input for g of x. And what we get then is the quantity square root of x, and we're going to square that. That will produce x. However, the domain over on the first one here, this domain, or the input for x, would be any value. And that's consistent with the absolute value of x graph. However, with this particular one, the domain is based on what the original input was. And that input, I will highlight right here, is going to be 0 to infinity. And so our domain for this particular one is going to be 0 to infinity. But it is going to look like the y equals x graph, only from 0 to infinity. Okay, we're going to move on to the next page. All right, on this page, we have a table of values, and we're going to look at the composite functions again. It's important that we look at, like we had stated, or I had stated in section 1.1, we want to look at all different forms of a function, all 4 of those. So this is the tabular method, and we're going to first look at f of h of 1. So we're going to find h of 1, and that gives us, hold on, let me highlight it. So h of 1 is here. That gives us 2. So we have now, we have now f of 2. And then we look at f of 2, and f of 2 is 6, and that's our final answer. And I know for some of you, that seems so terribly easy. And you know what? Good. That's awesome. You just run with it right now. And I promise you, once we get to series and sequences, you'll have a little bit of a challenge. All right, so we have f of 0 for this one. F of 0 is 1. So now we have f of 1, and f of 1 is, oops, I just crossed it off, sorry. F of 1 is 2, and that's our final answer. All right, you'd probably like an entire test of just those questions because they're so easy. All right, let's move and on to the next and change gears here. So we're going to talk about secant lines and the difference quotient. This is stuff that we learned in AB calculus, first year calculus, and it really is super important. You don't really know it in AB calculus, but it's super important because it really is the foundation of limits and derivatives, and it's just so cool. I think, you know, especially if you're sort of a math nerd, you're going to go back to this and say, well, okay, now a lot of that stuff in AB calculus at the beginning finally makes some sense. I think often in AB calculus at the beginning, you see it and it's brand new and it's a little overwhelming and it's really fast. And so I think that this will sort of help cement the things that you learned, especially early on in AB calculus. It's just a very neat how it all comes together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and I'm just going to draw out this secant line between the point x, f of x, and then x plus h, f of x plus h. Okay, so what I did was I drew out the point P, which is here, and that is going to be an x value labeled just as x, and then a y value labeled as f of x. And then we have Q, which is going to be an x value of x plus h, and a y value of f of x plus h. And what happened in terms of the transformation here is that we moved from P and we moved horizontally h units, and therefore when we end here, we end at x plus h. So if we, for instance, if we started, let's say this point was 3, and we moved 2 units, this point would have been 5 then. Okay, we're just using variables to notate the general move. And then vertically, what's happening is that we're looking at f of x plus h minus f of x, which is some arbitrary value. Okay, when we're looking at the difference quotient, we're looking at the change in the y values divided by the change in the x values. So the secant line here, the slope of this secant line, is going to be, and we're just going to use the simple y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 is going to be f of x plus h, and y1 is f of x, and x2 is going to be x plus h, and x1 is going to be x. All right, now some of you are looking at this saying, well, we can simplify the denominator, and you're absolutely right. So we have our numerator, can't do much with that. As much as you want to try to, I don't know, get in and move that x plus h around, you can't. And then the denominator, the x's will cancel, and so you're simply left with h, which again, I had shown you in that picture is just the horizontal change. So this is the slope of the secant line of any function between any 2 points. So if you know where you're starting the values at, so whatever x is, and you know how far away the next point is horizontally along the x-axis, then you can figure out your difference quotient. And this again is the slope of a secant line. This is considered the average rate of change. So if you're, you know, thinking of a car traveling, and it takes you X amount of time to travel a certain number of miles, that's your average rate of change. This is the calculation for that. That's the slope of the secant line. Okay. Now I want to make just a quick connection to the tangent line, which isn't really a part of this section. We're not really technically doing any calculus right now because that's really going to start off in chapter 2. But let's say that we want to look at the limit as h goes to 0. In other words, what we're doing on our graph here is we're sort of thinking of this as moving, you know, if h is going to 0, we're moving this point Q closer and closer to P. You know, think about what that is going to give you. What type of line is that going to approach? If h is going to 0, that's going to basically give you a tangent line at P. And so if we took a look at the limit as h goes to 0 of this particular difference quotient, this is the slope of a tangent line, which is the derivative. That's the definition of the derivative. So that's how important this difference quotient is. That's how important a secant line is to the transition to a tangent line, to the transition to a derivative. Okay, we're going to go on to the next page. Okay, on this next page, there is a second sort of common definition that our textbook as well as AP uses. So I'm going to pause again and draw this out. All right, so what we have is point P, which is going to be A f of A. So I drew that in red. Point Q, which is X, f of X, that's in blue. Keep in mind that AP or any of our material, we could use any dummy variables we want here. I've seen AP use C's and D's and whatever. Or T's for velocity and position, acceleration. You can use any variable here. It's just this this style of a difference quotient just looks a little different than the other one. I want you to understand that it gives you exactly the same thing. Okay, so what we're going to calculate is the slope of the secant line in green that I drew. The slope of that secant line, if we use our simple y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, is going to be f of x, which is our y2 minus f of a, divided by x minus a. And again, this is simply just the same calculation of a slope of a line between 2 points. It just looks a little different and it's labeled a little bit different, but it does give the average rate of change over a particular interval. Last thing I want to say before we're done with this section is that when we are in an AP exam, especially like an FRQ exam, many times if you have a table of values or something that is like a piecewise function, you might get a question that says, what is the average rate of change over an interval? And AP wants you to essentially calculate the slope of a secant line. If you are asked to do that, you must show the difference quotient. You can't do that calculation in your head. You have to make sure that you show the difference quotient that I showed you in this expression as well as the one that I showed you before. You show the setup of it. Typically, it's going to be utilizing this one between 2 points, and it's going to show the different points separately. And so that to get full credit, you must have that in place. Okay, that is it for section 1.3.